librarian, so I can kind of get away with it. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's just like the perfect job, you know? So,
That's
um,
great though as well because like obviously you work at a library, so that's like um you're dressing for the part because you're dressing as a fictional character. Well, partly.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
So,
Exactly.
so I believe we're live now. So, so hello to everybody who is either here or showing up. Let me see. Looks like,
Hello everybody.
all right. Okay.
I'm just gonna
So
promote it on my channel.
I wish let me see. I'm gonna go just on Discord real quick because like there's there's my camera with me on it, and then there's your image, and then I'm also in it on another camera, and I'm just like, can we, if we take me out of there, it's just going to be a weird loading square, which I don't know why they do that, but I don't know. I feel like this is just one of those things where it never works out the way I want it to. So, oh well. Again, just want to say welcome to everybody. We have not started the podcast yet. We're going to in a couple of minutes here. Lewis has actually requested that we go ahead and start an hour early, and I was like, you know what, I can do that today. So I was happy to do that for him. And we're gonna review Spider-Man 3. And I'm very much looking forward to this one. Lewis, you're going to be the first person that I have done a movie review with. Like when I've done the movie reviews in the past,
Ooh.
it's always just been me. And I think there's an upside and there's a downside to it. The upside is, well, I'm going to start with the downside. The downside is it's just me droning on, okay? It's just me being like blah 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 blah. I like this, da 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 da. I like that. You know, the upside is that those episodes tend to be shorter. I don't think I've ever done a solo episode where I've gone past about 45 or 50 minutes. So, um, we're you've got somewhere to be, which is why we have opted to start early today. And so I'm gonna try to respect your time as much as possible and get started real soon.
I do appreciate that by the way. I just want to say that I
Yeah.
appreciate starting an hour early.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
No.
it's just I totally forgot I had something. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to rush the review because obviously there's a lot to talk about in Spider-Man 3 as people come to realize. Like it's there's a lot of talking points and it's a movie that I truly love because I grew up with it. So I want to I want to give the attention that it deserves, should I say?
Good. That's good. I think we'll go ahead and just get started because you're gonna find that you and I have a lot of matching opinions. I think on this movie. So,
I
let's.
think we will. Based on what we talked about with Marvel Spider-Man 2, I
Oh
think we
yeah.
will.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. All right. So, all right, guys, we're about to get started. Here we go. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Webline, a podcast about Spider-Man and his amazing world. Here we discuss all aspects of our favorite wall crawler in a fun, informal, but informative forum. I am your humble host, the Spidey Librarian, and this episode is a retro review of Spider-Man 3, the 2007 finale of the Sam Raimi trilogy starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and Rosemary Harris, and J.K. Simmons, of course. This week, I am rejoined by Lewis Films, my fellow Spider Man YouTuber. Lewis, how are things, and what have you been up to?
First of all, I was just gonna say it's great to be back. I had a great time talking about Marvel Spider-Man 2, so I'd love to. I can't wait to get stuck into talking about this movie. But yeah, no, things have been good, man. Just just uploading Spider-Man videos, like us Spidey
Yeah,
YouTubers do.
again, I'm very impressed just with your output. So I hope one day to rise to that level. We'll see if it ever happens. So, anyways, welcome back to the podcast. I have been looking forward to reviewing this movie with you. Do you know that this is the first retro review episode that I've done with a guest? Like you're my first guest for something like this. So it's really exciting. So.
That's
That's
really
really
cool.
cool.
I'm
I'm
really
really
excited.
excited.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
no,
it's
it's
gonna
gonna
be
be
good.
good.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get some of the regular stuff out of the way. So, the Webline streams on Sundays at 2 p.m. Central on my YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe there as well as on your favorite podcast service. And leave us a like, review, and follow where appropriate. If you're on a service that doesn't carry the Webline, let me know by shooting me an email at spideylibrarian@gmail.com, and I'll do what I can to get it pushed out to you. Finally, for those of you here on the live stream with us today, please be sure to thwip the like button and chime in with your perspectives in chat. But before we do a daring dive into our timely topic, it's time to dish on the latest spiderific developments with our Knockout News segment, the Bugle News Flash. There really isn't a lot in terms of news this week for Marvel Spider-Man, or just Spider-Man in general. There's one piece of Marvel Spider-Man 2 news, and then I think I'm going to do a very short opinion piece. And Lewis, I definitely want your input on this one as well, because I'm not sure where we're going to fall on this topic. But let's just say that this week, the big piece of news is that Marvel Spider-Man 2 has gotten an update that fixes several major bugs. Apparently, one of those bugs involved, like, what was it, players turning into, like, cubic objects or something? And apparently,
Yeah,
apparently people were like, no, give that back. We want that, you know? um,
yeah.
I actually had and I don't know if this is a bug like that was caught or if it was just a random glitch, but when I was doing those you know those missions where you have to like follow the stupid mechanical birds, like you have to trail in their wake and it's really fast. I really don't like those missions. They were very frustrating. I was so happy when I finally beat them. But during one of those missions, I was chasing I call him the birdie bastard, and I was chasing him, and in trying to turn, I was trying to make a turn that was way too sharp. I somehow got thrown into a building, like a building room, and like I was stuck behind the walls, and and I was and the bird got away and everything, but I'm just sitting here like I'm playing as Miles and I'm chilling in this room and it's dark in the room but I can see outside into the city, and it was just like, wow, this is a thing. I don't know. Have you encountered any weird bugs in the game aside from like I think the one that we saw on your final playthrough?
No,
No,
not
not
really,
really,
surprisingly.
surprisingly.
I
I
was
was
really
really
surprised
surprised
when I
when I
saw
saw
people
people
talk
talk
about the
about the
bugs.
bugs.
Because I
I
was
was
like,
like,
I
I
barely
barely
experienced
experienced
any at
any at
all.
all.
I
I
had
had
one,
one.
I
I
think we
think we
talked
talked
about
about
it
it
last
last
time I
time I
was
was
on.
on.
The
The
one
one
where
where
I
I
had,
had
during the
during the
first
first
lizard
lizard
mission,
mission,
I
I
had,
had
I
I
went
went
to
to
Peter's
Peter's
house
house
as
as
Miles.
Miles,
And
and
then,
then
basically,
basically
Miles
Miles
teleported
teleported
back to
back to
Manhattan,
Manhattan,
and
and
then
then
I
I
switched to
switched to
Peter.
Peter.
So
So
it
it
was
was
like
like
one of
one
those
of those
things
things
where,
where,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
not
not
that
that
big of
big
a
of a
deal,
deal,
but it
but it
was
was
like,
like
I
I
felt
felt
like
like
they
they
could have
could have
made
made
it
it
so
so
that
that
you
you
couldn't
couldn't
control
control
Miles
Miles
during
during
that
that
time,
time,
and you
and you
had to
had to
switch
switch
to
to
Peter
Peter
before
before
going
going
back
back
to
to
the
the
house
house,
Right.
or
or
going
going
back to
back to
Queens
Queens
to
to
Dr.
Dr.
Connors.
Connors.
So
So
that was
that was
one
one
thing that
thing that
kind of
kind of
bugged
bugged
me.
me.
Apart
Apart
from
from
that,
that,
there
there
wasn't
wasn't
really
really
any
any
in-game
in-game
glitches
glitches
or
or
things
things
that
that
kind of
kind of
misplaced
misplaced
the
the
story
story
in
in
terms
terms
of
of
like,
like
what's the
what's the
word,
word,
being
being
engrossed in
engrossed
it,
in
I
it, I
guess you
guess you
could
could
say,
say,
all
all
Right.
too
too
much for
much for
me.
me.
It
It
was
was
very
very
generally a
generally a
smooth
smooth
experience.
experience.
Oh
Oh
no,
no,
wait,
wait,
there was
there was
that
that
one.
one.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
was
there was
that
that
one in
one
my
in my
final
final
stream.
stream.
Apart
Apart
from
from
that,
that,
that was
that was
it.
it.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
Yeah,
just
which
simple
was a
as.
fairly, I think it was a fairly common bug. I certainly know I know I got it. And so I think a lot of people did. So I just want to say a quick hello to Jay Casali. Hello. And Cineflick, how you doing? Good to see you guys. Welcome to the stream. Um, yeah, this update, I mean, I can read the release notes, but I don't think that's going to be much fun. Let's just say addressed an issue where a player could become stuck during the finale of Marco's Memories. I never encountered that. An issue where a boss could become stuck in geometry, which I'm guessing is the bug that people wanted, because that sounds hilarious to me. The galvanized tutorial, which I think was that Miles Morales bug that we both had to deal with. And then just like several others, like they basically just addressed some stability issues and just basically made it so that things were a little more playable and hopefully a lot more enjoyable. So, and really, that's kind of all of the big news that I saw for this week. There's a lot of responses to Marvel's Spider-Man 2. There's a lot of speculation about like who the villains are going to be for Spider-Man 3. And while that's all great, it's not news, so I don't really cover it. So with that said, I'm gonna take a moment and just kind of do a small opinion piece. Let's see. Cineflix says that Lewis is kind of echoing. Is it bad or is it something that we can go on with? Because if it's a big issue, I might just need to switch to headphones. I could see that being a thing. Which I tried
I
doing
think we
last.
did this last time.
Yeah, I think we. I think I tried doing it last week, and it ended up being a disaster. We had to.
Oh, really?
Oh man, I have not had any podcast episodes start at 2 o'clock for the last 3 weeks, which is fine. But I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and try it right now. So let's go ahead and jump in, and let's see. All right, Ryan says it's pretty bad, so let me go ahead and see if I can go ahead and connect things here. And okay. Um Let me see. Okay, Lewis, let's just go ahead and see if let's see. I don't know, can you just give me a couple of test words or something real quick?
Hello. Is it working?
Oh man, that's going directly into the mic. That's bad. Okay. All right. I figured that that would not work, or I figured that that would work because it worked last week. Let me just try one or two other things. It could be a Discord setting. So, all right. Sorry guys. Again, this is just kind of what happens with um this is just what happens with technology sometimes. So, all right. Anyways,
Possibly
Possibly
might have
might
to
have to
just
just
have
have
your.
your.
Oh,
Oh,
is it
is it
working?
working?
I I don't know yet. It says it's connecting and now it doesn't. Did I turn it off? I probably turned it off. Hold on. This is what I get for trying to okay, there we go. It sees it now. It's connecting and I'm going to go over to Discord real quick. And again, like it's reasons like this that I have been looking into things like StreamYard for specifically this because it's supposed to handle stuff like this without too much of a problem. So, okay, let's see. Output device. Ah, okay, that might be the issue. Okay, let's see what happens now. Okay, test test 1 2 3. Lewis.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, all right. So I've got Lewis essentially on a different audio channel now. If I could get some feedback from the chat, letting me know how the audio is, and again, Lewis, I don't know if you listened to the episode when I put it out on Spotify, but like you're you know how we kind of like redid a section because someone said that there were audio quality issues. I actually just put both sections in because so it does sound like there's like a repeat because I really didn't find any issues with the audio quality on that one. Like I listened to it and I'm like there were one or two little bumps, but it wasn't bad. So, all right,
Oh,
okay,
it should be okay then. Going
yeah,
forward.
yeah, no, and it looks like everything is going where it should be. Cineflix says that it sounds better. So, guys, thank you very
Cool.
much for this. I really do appreciate it, and you know, I think we may just try to move on here because I know you're going to be in a hurry and doing sections over again is always a bit weird. So I'll deal with the audio issues and hopefully they won't be too bad in editing. So all right. So with all that said, with all of the with our one news item out of the way, I'm going to kind of jump into a small opinion piece here. And it revolves around a topic that I have seen a lot of division on in the last week or so. And that is going to be what people seem to think of Miles Morales' suit, his new suit, at the end of Marvel's Spider-Man 2. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm on the I seem to be on the minority end of this issue here. I seem to be on the losing side, if you will. Most people dislike the suit. They hate it. I have seen comparisons of it to the Confederate flag, which I think is a very disingenuous comparison. I think it was people just looking for something to call it, and that kind of stuck. But I actually did have this discussion with someone recently who said that they didn't like it. They're like, "But I like Miles Morales' classic black and red." Now, again, we are all welcome to our own opinions here. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it. But I want to kind of explain why I like it, and I think that when I've said this to people, they're kind of like, I mean, that makes some sense. I don't know if I change minds, but I at least change the perspectives a little bit. And so what I think of Miles's suit when I saw it at the end, I actually was like, oh my god, that is so awesome. And here's why. Um, One of the things that we discussed in our talk about Spider-Man 2, Lewis, was how Insomniac is not afraid to actually take during these kind of short-term projects. They take these characters and they actually develop them. They actually evolve and their roles tend to change. And at the end of Spider-Man 2, we see something that we almost never see, which is Peter going, I think it's it's a good time in my life to kind of step back and I might not be able to be Spider-Man all the time, but I'll be here for you if you need me to. Which I mean, we all know he's going to come back. And what I like about Miles' suit is it is an evolution of his style. And I love the classic red and black. I mean, but as for this being an Insomniac only creation, I think this is pretty nice because it shows that Miles is taking the Spider-Man colors, the red and blue, and putting his own spin on it. And it's an homage to Peter, who obviously has been his mentor. And it also shows kind of like a level of evolution, graduation, whatever you want to call it, of Miles really coming into his own. And his storyline, while it may not have dominated Spider-Man 2, certainly was good at showing his development as a character, as a Spider-Man, and as a person. He had to take on a lot of sort of trauma with Mr. Negative, and just kind of really uh, move past his hatred. And so I feel like taking the colors of the person that came before him, and then people who he is, and why just kind of like how he has grown as a person and as a Spider-Man. And again, not everyone has to agree with me, and that's fine. I just feel like this perspective, the one that I felt as I was playing the game, it gets lost in what I feel is kind of a deluge of hate. Now, I'm also not going to lie. When I heard or when I saw that the costume was being used as an Adidas promotion, I mean, like that did kind of knock it down a peg for me, and I feel like that is disappointing. But I saw that costume before I learned like about the Adidas tie-in, and so I still like it for the reasons that I stated. I don't think they did themselves any favors by making that just a cross promotional thing, though. But overall, I think that it works in the narrative. So, anyways, just my opinion. I feel just like it needs to be heard simply because I hear so much of the other side. Lewis, what do you think of it? And please Be frank.
I don't really like it at all.
Okay.
To be honest, I don't know. I have a few. I think the only saving grace for me was the point that you mentioned, which is like, yeah, it's definitely a representation of Miles's character, and it does pay homage to Peter, and it fits in that sense. But for me, it doesn't work on a stylistic level, and also it doesn't work on a story level for me as well. And the Adidas promotion, like you mentioned, when I found that out, it was just like, well, that's just I
It
don't know.
definitely
It
gave the
doesn't.
people
It's
who hate, it gave the people who hated it more of a reason to hate it.
yeah, exactly. And on the political stuff as well. By the way, that's something that I don't agree with. Don't bring politics into this. It's a Spider-Man suit. Come on now. Come on, guys. All right. Come on. What are we doing? Anyway, that side. No, for on a story level, I feel like it doesn't work only because I get that they're trying to cement it as an evolution for the character, but I feel as if because in the first game in Miles Morales he had the very Peter looking suit. It was the red and blue with the knee pads and the one from the comics.
Right, and it clearly
Um,
didn't fit him. Yeah.
there's yeah. So, but there's a whole but there's the scene. Obviously, Miles Morales, the game is like the game about him becoming his own man, his own Spider-Man.
Right.
Not
Right.
necessarily living up to the expectations of Peter, or not necessarily living up to the expectations that Spider-Man needs to in order to save the city by himself, which looks like he's going to do in the third game because Peter's taken a back step. But it's him getting his own suit in Miles Morales was like, hey, I'm my own Spider-Man. That was the red and black. That was what it represented. It's Spider-Man. It's got the same web patterns. It's got the same similar sort of vibe. It looks like Peter's suit in some ways, but it's my own suit. It's the black. It's got the red. It's Miles Morales' suit. But I feel like they repeated the same sort of thing in the second game with it. I thought it was a bit unnecessary. Because I felt like that kind of transition into him being his own Spider-Man had already been complete. I didn't think they needed to do it again. I get that it represents his arc in two, and that he's gone from being not all right with his father's death to accepting of his father's death, and it kind of ties into the whole him growing past that. But I felt like changing the suit every time a character changes, like I think it kind of devalues the change in a suit when it does happen. For the second time, I'm not really on board with it. Plus, I don't really think it looks that great. I think the black, red, and blue doesn't really go well together. I think the colors are all disproportionate. But maybe that's just because I'm used to seeing a more classic version of a Spider-Man suit. Maybe I'm just not used to it. Maybe it'll grow on me. Who knows? But I don't know. There's just a few reasons not to like it for me. I'm not a big fan of it. The more I think about it.
I mean, and that's fair, and I mean, like, I certainly hear where you're coming from. If I had a counterpoint to it, I would basically say that people felt the same way about the symbiote suit when it first arrived too. Everybody's like, "Hey, where's the classic red and blue? Why is Spider-Man all black and everything?" Like, so there is a certain amount of like, this is what I'm used to, and like I want that, that pre-expectation. But again, this is a temporary thing. It's not like this is the comics. It's not like, this is just kind of one of the temporary projects. But, I felt like I had seen so many people just kind of like, just clowning on this suit. And don't get me wrong, it has its issues. Again, I mentioned the Adidas promotion, but like, I don't know. For me, at least, I'm someone who genuinely loves Miles. I think Miles is an excellent character. Every Miles Morales story I've ever read has felt like a Spider-Man story, and I'm not saying he's better than Peter by any stretch. But I think I love Miles just about as much as I love Peter, and so for that reason, I like seeing him grow, kind of like we're seeing Peter grow. It doesn't work for everyone, and I'm perfectly willing to admit that. I just felt like this perspective needed to be shared because I don't see it very often. So,
That's fair enough. That's
all
fair
right.
enough. I mean, yeah, as well, like On that point, it's like, yeah, if you can enjoy the suit, there's nothing wrong with that. I think some people need to accept that as well, because there are a few people out there that will you know especially on Twitter or X, whatever it's called,
Twixter.
they will go after you if you like something that the vast majority of people don't.
Right.
And I don't like it, so I'm a part of that crowd. But if you like it, then that's fine. That's your opinion. And to be fair, the reasons as to why you like it are they're completely valid. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, cool. I appreciate that, and I'm really glad you and I mean, we appear to be of a like temperament, where it's like, yeah, we can disagree on something, and it can be totally cool. you know, sometimes
Exactly.
yeah, sometimes you don't see that much on the internet. So, all right. Well, and that's all the Spidey news for this week. Now, let's move on to our feature segment, a retro review of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. Now, as much as I love the first two Spider-Man movies, I can't deny that there's a notable comparative dip in the overall experience of the third film. With that said, while I'll never deny that it's the weakest entry in the trilogy, I still don't understand the amount of hate that I've seen directed at this film by what seems a fairly sizable swath of Spider fans. While it has its flaws, and we will go over them, it's still at its heart a fun and fairly emotional send-off for the film series that deserves props and love for the things it does accomplish. Lewis, what's your kind of just overall take on Spider-Man 3 before we start kind of diving into the specifics?
Um, I think it's fallen into a trap of being underrated and overrated at the same time.
Ooh,
I think
okay,
there's a
this is
little
interesting.
gray area for Spider-Man 3.
Uh-huh.
There's a little gray area for Spider-Man 3, I think. It's not terrible. It's not the greatest. But I think the people who love it tout it as one of the best Spider-Man movies that have ever come out. One of the best pieces of Spider-Man media that's ever come out. And then the people that hate it say the exact opposite. And I think both are completely disingenuous. Not to say that you can't have that opinion, like we've mentioned, every opinion's welcome. But I think it's unfair to say that it has qualities that can outlast, and outdo the likes of Across the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man 2. Like, just on an objective filmmaking storytelling level, there are baseline things that just universally people would agree Spider-Man 2 and other movies and other pieces of Spider-Man media do inherently better than Spider-Man 3. But for the people that don't like it, it's like, well, come on, you got to give it credit where credit's due. It has some beautiful cinematography, has some beautiful action sequences. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
character moments, despite over the entire movie not being up to par to Spider-Man 2, are still great. It's not. I think it's got this little gray area where I think some people really overrate it and some people really underrate it, and I think it's kind of in that. It's in that little section.
It sounds, again, we're about of like minds on this film. Like, we're both willing to acknowledge it has plenty of flaws, but we also kind of agree that, or we seem to agree at least, that it's still a decent movie. It's not bad, but that it also has its good points too. So, all right, well, I guess the first aspect of the film I'd like to cover, and again, this is spoilers for like a 15-year-old movie now, but I guess we can go ahead and do a little plot summary. Um, I mean, if you want, I'll start off. If you want to rattle off the plot, Lewis, I'm happy to share duties either way. But what would you like to do?
Oh no, you go ahead, man. We'll just go
Okay.
back and forth. I guess we'll just
So
talk about the plot.
sure, yeah. So at the beginning of Spider-Man 3, it looks like Peter has kind of he's got it down, all right? He's been Spider-Man for a few years. The city seems to love him despite everything that J. Jonah Jameson has been saying about him. And he is just kind of on top of the world. He is doing his thing. He is loving it, and he's I mean, let's be honest. He's getting a little big for his britches. And then a few things end up happening. First, he's very clearly ignoring a lot of the issues going on in Mary Jane's life, and believes that he believes he's ready to propose to her, and just kind of like is arrogantly being all like, "Yep, I think she'll accept. I think we're ready. We're gonna do this." And then at about the same time, we also see that uh, they basically get informed by the police that the person who actually ended up shooting Uncle Ben was not the robber, or was not the burglar, or whoever, the thug, whatever you want to call that guy, that he took down in the first movie. It was uh, Flint Marko. And so Flint Marko is on the run from the authorities. They show his origin story. He falls into a, what was it, a super collider? I think that's what he called it in No Way Home.
Something like
He
that.
fell into a super
Yeah, like
collider and then became part of the sand, and and then
Can
suddenly
I just say that's
becomes,
really
you
random,
know.
right?
I mean, it's
That's
like
really
you
random.
just wandered into a collider, you know.
Like what? There was no word of this. This just existed.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
thing just existed.
Because he was on the run from anyways. So while Peter and MJ are out, an alien symbiote falls from the sky, as I guess it was part of a fragment from a comet or something, and essentially kind of rides to Peter's home. And as Peter starts to kind of lose control of his life, he's also being fought for a job by he's competing for a job at the Bugle with Eddie Brock, who we find is not exactly a good guy. But as Peter starts to kind of get more glum and morose and angry about his life, the symbiote finds a way to bond with him. Oh, right. There's also stuff going on with Harry. Feel free to chime in with anything I'm missing, because I'm really bad at this sometimes. But anyways, with all that going on, the symbiote bonds with him, and it makes certain aspects of him being Spider-Man easier. He appears to be stronger. He does things a lot easier, and he's a lot more ruthless. And he doesn't seem to notice it at first. And so it's only it's under the symbiote's influence that he finds Marco as Sandman, and basically tries to drown him, and thinks that he does drown him. It causes him to act aggressively towards Mary Jane in that very memorable jazz bar scene, for instance. And essentially, like, Peter eventually realizes this thing is taking me over. I need to get rid of it. So he gets rid of it after making sure that Eddie Brock is fired from the Bugle for what is it, for plagiarism with his photos, essentially.
Plagiarism, yeah. Yeah,
And
plagiarism.
and then in another cosmic coincidence, Brock happens to be at the church that Spider-Man is trying to fight the symbiote from, and then it falls onto him and bonds with him and becomes Venom. Venom basically seeks out Sandman, who manages to reconstitute himself, and they basically agree to gang up on him, forcing Spider-Man to turn to his former best friend turned enemy, Harry Osborn, who has been trying to kill him this entire movie, and has assumed his father's legacy as the new Goblin. They team up, and essentially Harry ends up sacrificing himself to save Peter, and Peter hears Marco's version of what happens and comes to understand that Marco did not mean to kill his uncle. It was an accidental shot, and he apologizes for what he did. Peter forgives him. He and Harry reconcile before Harry passes away, and the trilogy kind of ends on what I feel is a fairly uncertain note between him and MJ, much like it did in the second movie, where they they kind of both, they I think they agree to give things another shot, but they've also just recently been through a lot, and I think they're both very uncertain about how things are gonna shape out for them as the movie ends. I don't know. How was that plot summary, and is there anything you would add or change about it?
First of all, I think I think it's funny you go, oh, and stuff happened with Harry. I think that just like completely summarizes the biggest issue with this film. It
Yeah.
it does, because there's so much going on. I'm sure we'll get into this, but like, yeah, it's a good movie, has its moments. I think the ending is probably one of the strongest endings I've seen in a Spider-Man movie, because I think Sam Raimi is so beautifully he's so beautifully rich in his like he knows how to end a movie. You know what I mean? I feel as if it wasn't cheap. Like, I think the cheap ending would have been, oh yeah, they're back together. They make it really obvious. Harry's died. Well, might as well be there for each other. You don't say that. It just ends with a slow dance and they hug each other, and you kind of get this open endingness to it. Like,
Hmm.
you know they're gonna get back together because they need to support each other, but they don't explicitly say it. And I think there's something beautiful about that. They don't. It's like the
Yeah.
show don't tell rule, right? They show you that they're grieving together. They don't tell you that they're grieving together because of Harry. You know why. And I don't know. It was a nice ending. But yeah, in terms of it's a movie. it's
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 a
a movie.
movie. No, no.
Yep.
It is, and I mean, like, it's one of those. It like I like what you said about that. The uncertainty, has its own kind of beauty, because, like, I mean, we all know that life is pretty uncertain. It's just you are never guaranteed a tomorrow. Anything could happen. And when they show and don't tell that, sometimes that is a really good way to end it. I don't have any complaints about that ending. I think that ending is actually, it's very realistic. I have a great life, I feel. Um, but tomorrow is never certain. I could lose my job. I could be in a car accident and get seriously injured or killed. So, I kind of like that. I like the verisimilitude. I think we mentioned that in the last episode we did together. The appearance of, um the appearance of truth in our fiction. So, but yeah, I don't know. What would you say are some of the big themes in the movie? I think one of the big ones, and again, I'm sorry, I feel like my camera in your display is just, I feel like it's like, uh crowding you out, and I don't like it. So sorry, I'm just fixing things so that you're a little more prominent. Um I mean, for me, one of the big themes in the movie is, of course, power and responsibility, or to put it another way, like having power, and then, making decisions about how you use that power, which I think is really it kind of rears its head in what I feel is a semi-contrived way in the third movie, because it's the whole re-traumatizing of Peter with regard to his uncle, and it's like, oh well, it's this guy, well, I better show him what for and everything. And it's, he makes some bad decisions under the influence of the symbiote, with regard to that. But, like, to me, that's a fairly, central theme throughout the movie. What do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely it is. I think that's something. It's very. If Spider-Man 3 was to come out in 2023, that would be a very controversial topic. That, as I feel, because a lot of us grew up with the movie, or at least a lot of us saw it, when Twitter wasn't a thing. Well, it was a thing
Right.
actually. Bloody hell, Twitter. Um, but like, people didn't use Twitter as they do today. But like, Spider-Man 3, I feel, is the decision to rehash Ben's death and change who killed him. I didn't realize as a kid how dangerous and kind of detrimental to the character that is. Because in my personal opinion, I think that's sacrilege. You can't do that. You cannot change anything about Peter's origin story, because if you Spider-Man's one of those characters where his origin story is so set in stone no matter what version you look at, and I think that tells a lot about the character and tells you a lot about the values of the character. It's so important to who the character is that it never gets changed. And if it does, it gets changed. Like the MCU, Aunt May will say it, but the great power, great responsibility
Right.
is still there, right?
Right.
But changing the man that shot Uncle Ben completely destroys the message from Spider-Man 1. Now, luckily, I saw it as a kid where this didn't really matter to me. So I kind of have rose-tinted glasses, and I feel like the same thing has happened with many people, because I don't see a lot of people talking about this. But this is a crazy decision. If this happened nowadays, Spider-Man 3 would be completely destroyed, like, on Twitter for making that type of decision. So it's really weird to me. Like, I like it. I think they did it. I think one of the things that Sam Raimi did really well in the movie was displaying the arc of choice between
Mhm.
both Sandman and Peter. And I think Marco and Peter had this relationship throughout the movie, even though they didn't have it physically. They had kind of this back and forth mental relationship with each other, where Peter had something bad done to him, and Marco knew that he did something bad, and they both couldn't change it, and they both kind of come to an understanding at the end. And I really like that. But it was in favor of taking something away about Spider-Man's origin story that was very important. And I don't know. I don't see a lot of people talking about it. I think it's really weird.
Well,
I want to know what your thoughts on that are.
well, I mean, this is something that happens. It happens with surprising regularity. And when I say that, I'm basically referring to essentially revisionist history of things like origin stories and stuff like that. Um, did you ever read? It was an X-Men comic called I think it was called Deadly Genesis. Have you read it?
No, I will admit I've never read an X-Men comic
Okay.
in my life.
Oh,
I'm so
okay. Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. That's all right.
I'm
It's been forever since I read it. It's by Ed Brubaker. Okay, so it's really good. Ed Brubaker is a very good writer. But like there's this kind of story that like the original X-Men they went to I think it was like Krakoa to it was like a mutant island basically. And essentially the original X-Men got captured by Krakoa, and it was basically using them to kind of like feed off of their energy essentially, and it sent Cyclops back to Professor X, and he told him what happened. And so Professor X had to form a new team, and this new team had Wolverine, Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, like all of these kind of like, classic newer X-Men essentially. And that for the longest time was just the story. Like that was what they did. In Deadly Genesis, Ed Brubaker basically writes a story in between when Cyclops comes back from Krakoa and when Professor Xavier assembles that team. He assembles an entirely other team of mutants that he sends to Krakoa to try to liberate the original X-Men, and they got their asses kicked. And like I think they all ended up dying essentially. And it was just kind of one of those things where I was like, that is a big like rewrite right there. That is a huge rewrite that really kind of redefines Charles Xavier's character. Basically makes him out to be a much worse person than you actually think he is. But like I see things like this in comics all the time, and I'm not gonna say when it started because I don't really know. I feel like a lot of writers they'll get in there and they'll be like, okay, here's the established story, but what if I put this spin on it, you know? And I think you see some of that like in the Amazing Spider-Man comics. Who was it? Was it Nick Spencer who he basically tried to retcon the entire Sin's Past storyline, which I get wanting to do that, but like
Yeah, thank God though.
yeah, but I mean like and again I haven't read a whole lot of that run, but I've heard that like it was just like, okay, well, that was one thing that he did okay. There were other things that weren't so great, you know. I'm not going to pretend to know all the details there, but what I am saying is that there is kind of this history of writers trying to find little cracks in the wall, so to speak, of a character, of an origin, of a big nexus point in their lives, and trying to find something to write kind of within it that doesn't necessarily alter things, but it does kind of, change character perspectives. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that to justify what happens here. I'm just laying out some context. But I mean, overall, it was just like, like I think when Ed Brubaker did it, yeah, that was a big change, but it was pretty cool. Like some of those mutants were pretty cool, and it's like, will they ever come back? I think one of them did survive, and he ended up being Cyclops' brother, so that was a big deal too. I think Ed Brubaker did a good job. I don't think they did a very good job in Spider-Man 3, with this, where they basically just seem to alter
Ooh.
who the gunman is just for the sake of re-traumatizing Peter. I felt like that was a pretty terrible motivation, and that if you're going to do that, you really needed to add a lot more substance as to why they were doing that, and I don't feel like they accomplished it. So,
Yeah. No, I think that's probably one of the things that's kind of come to my attention recently. By the way, just for context, though, I learned this the other day. It's kind of off topic, but kind of on topic.
okay.
The first time I'm pretty sure they did a rewrite like that, where they rewrote a character's history and like did retcons. I think was the was when they rebooted Batman the first time. Was it the 40s or the 50s? So Batman was the first ever Batman that came out. Was the one that ended up having a kid that would grow up to become, oh, what's her name? I've completely forgotten. It's been a while since I seen it, but
Would it be the Huntress or
they did
something?
the original Batman. Yeah, was it Huntress? I don't know.
Yeah,
Either way,
I
Batman had a kid, and essentially, she grew up and she was in like her 30s, and then she came back later down the line during a multiverse crossover event. But that was the first Batman, and because Batman got too old, they went back and they retold the same origin story, but rewrote it and retold it differently. And obviously we've gotten further down the line of Batman. He's almost completely different to how he was originally. And it was just an example of them going back, doing rewrites, evolving the character. And I'm pretty sure that's where that kind of thing started, because they now comics nowadays, they'll rewrite stuff, but they'll never let the character go past a certain point, if you know what I mean. Like
oh
they'll
yeah.
go back, do the rewrites.
Oh yeah.
They'll go back, do the rewrites, put new stories in, potentially retcon stuff, change stuff, but they'll never they'll never let the character go past a certain point. They'll always go back and change stuff to fit stuff of the like. It's like One More Day's another example. Just
Oh
completely
God.
change a lot of the character's history. Like
Yeah.
it happens all the time, and either
Yeah.
way, yeah. Spider-Man 3, they did the similar sort of thing, but in that continuity. Um, and yeah, um, it's weird. It doesn't get spoken about enough, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, there's just a certain stasis point, particularly with Spider-Man, that the writers like to keep him at, and well, which is why I hope Ultimate Spider-Man is a huge success. Like I want that to be the default setting for Spider-Man now. I don't think it'll happen, but we want what we want. So another.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
gonna be
go ahead.
huge, Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh, I think so. I think so.
It's gonna be huge. Yeah, yeah, because they're doing Peter isn't actually gonna be bitten by the spider until he's about 30 years old or something like that. They're doing a whole different thing. Like generally, it's gonna be completely different. How they handle I still think great power comes great responsibility is gonna be a theme in that comic,
Oh
but
yeah,
how they
I
do
think
it,
so.
I don't know.
Yeah, no,
It's gonna be weird, but I'm interested. I'm in.
same,
I'm in.
same. One of the other big themes of the movie for me is basically forgiving people who have wronged you. Um, and I think you get that not only with Peter and Flint Marko, You get you get an example of Eddie Brock failing to do that. You get examples of Mary Jane having to decide to forgive Peter for being a complete and total ass during this movie. And you know, it's kind of one of those things where what was it? I think it was Rosemary Harris's Aunt May. She talks about like, you know, like I I don't have the right to, you know, decide another person's life. I guess it's not forgiveness so much as just a lack of judgment, or, you know, choosing not to judge someone. But I do feel that's kind of a form of grace and therefore forgiveness in and of itself. But I really do feel, you know, like you know, I mean, you could say that Harry has that too, because he's being haunted by his father for like the last two movies, both literally and figuratively. And you know, he has to make that decision to be his best self, and you know, be like, okay, I need to rise above this. I need to be there for my friend, you know. And you can't get there without at least a certain amount of forgiveness. So I don't know. What do you think? I mean, am I just reaching here? Does this movie, like when you think of this movie, do you think of those themes ever? It was just something that jumped out to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All
You
right.
hit the nail on the head
Oh,
there.
let's go into some character analysis. I think this is where things could get fun. Um, I'd say let's go character by character, and I think while we're doing this, let's think about the acting and then maybe the writing for that character. I want to start actually with Sandman. I think someone said that Sandman is their favorite. Cineflick in the chat says it. Sandman is probably his personal favorite Raimi villain. So, which you know, overall, I really liked Sandman in this movie. Like, I'm just like, you know what, Sam Raimi, you can write just about any Spider-Man villain you want, because I think he generally tends to do them justice. Sandman, while I'm not a big fan of, again, the re-traumatization of Peter in order to make that personal connection, I do think that once you accept that and just kind of roll with it, it actually turns into a fairly beautiful story where they just hate each other for a while, and then through understanding, Sandman's like, I wronged you, and I didn't mean to, and all this bad stuff just happens to me, which I'm sure Peter can identify with, you know. And you know, they forgive each other, and I really liked that. I really liked the writing after you got over that initial hump. And I believe that Thomas Hayden Church does an excellent Sandman. He's very stolid, he's very gruff, and very, like, you can tell that he only cares about his daughter, and that's it. That's all he cares about. And Spider-Man is an obstacle, and so that's why he decides to fight Spider-Man. Really enjoyed the character overall. What did you think of him?
No, yeah, nail on the head again. Yeah, yeah. It's just he's. I think Sandman's the best part of this movie. Thomas Hayden Church, by far one of the best actors for a Spider-Man villain that we've had.
He was good.
You know, I think he gets. I don't think he gets enough credit. The same way that people see. Am I stretching by saying RDJ is Iron Man? Probably, because it's not as iconic. But
Mhm.
in my opinion, obviously I grew up with Spider-Man 3, and Thomas. I can't see anyone else as Sandman. Maybe John Cena, but like, because that casting's been made a lot, that fan casting. But Thomas
I could
Hayden
see
Church
that.
is that Thomas Hayden Church is iconic Sandman. I can't see anyone else as Sandman. He's great, and like you said, the writing, once you get past the whole Peter thing, it's yeah, it's he's probably the best written character in the film, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And by the way, it oh my god, you can see why Raimi wanted him to be the main villain, right?
Oh yeah.
God damn, Raimi did not want Venom, and Sony forced him to put Venom in there, and you can see why Sandman was meant to be the main villain.
Oh
You can
yes.
see why.
Oh yes.
Who didn't let Raimi cook? They should have let Raimi cook. God damn it. Damn it.
Y- you
Sorry.
know, and I mean,
I wish
one,
we could
this
get Spider-Man 3.
yeah, this is a great segue into Venom, and also what I feel is kind of one of the reasons that this movie isn't as successful as it could be. So we'll talk about Venom first. Topher Grace as Eddie Brock. Okay, so I'm just gonna get this out of the way. Topher Grace is not a big guy. Eddie Brock in the comics has been. All right. Okay, big deal. You can get a Venom suit and get artificially bulked up. So that has never been an issue for me. What I like about Topher Grace is he does smarmy so good. He does smarmy almost as good as Tom Hardy does. I'm not saying he's a better Eddie Brock than Tom Hardy by any means. I'm saying that aspect, though, he's got that down. He's got that down. Tom Hardy, he's a little bit more righteous, and I think I like that more about him. But Topher Grace is really good at playing Eddie Brock as he was written, which was essentially uh, it's like ultimate Eddie Brock from the comics. Dude was just doing anything he could to get ahead, and he was not afraid to be underhanded to do it. Uh, Topher Grace as Venom. Here's what I'm going to say about that. I don't think Topher Grace really has the voice for Venom. When I think of Topher, or when I think of Venom, I'm thinking like Tony Todd's voice from Spider-Man 2. I'm thinking the low kind of rumbly thing they do with Tom Hardy's voice in the Venom movies. Like when you become Venom, I'm sorry, you're being possessed by a symbiote. Your vocals are going to change, and you're going to become something sinister and deep, I guess. And I really wish that they had done more with that aspect of Venom. Your thoughts?
Oh, yep, completely agree. One thing I like about Eddie Brock in this movie is, as opposed to popular opinion, I really like Eddie Brock in this movie. I
Mm-hmm.
think Sam Raimi does a really good job of crafting his character as kind of a opposite to Peter Parker, and an almost a
Yes.
reflection of what Peter could
Yes.
become if
Uh-huh.
he is a selfish dickhead, right? And that's what he eventually does become, because there's a lot more things there's a lot more similarities between Peter and Eddie in the second act of the film
Yes.
than you realize when he gets the symbiote. But at first you're kind of like, oh, this guy's a bit of a dick, and then Peter turns into that, and it's kind of like, it's like, yeah, so he's yeah, I think Raimi does a good job of that, and I think for this type of movie and what was going on in the movie, I think it worked. No complaints there. In terms of Venom, thing is, it's hard to blame Sam Raimi when he didn't want to put him in there in the first place. But I think Sam
Mm-hmm.
Raimi, I think its Venom was handled very poorly. I blame Sony first and foremost for pushing Venom upon Sam Raimi in the first place. Because I thought Harry and Sandman should have been the main villains wholeheartedly, but it just they just I don't know. When Venom said when not Venom when Sam Raimi said he didn't like Venom and he didn't want to use him, you can see why. This Venom was just, it's not even Venom. He doesn't speak like Venom. He speaks like Eddie Brock with a vengeance.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right.
Doesn't
Um, and I'm going to use this as a launching point to just talk really quickly, or not. I don't know. I tend to ramble. But I'm gonna talk a little bit about why I'm always going to feel like Sony should give up the Spider-Man property, and some people agree with me, some people don't, and that's fine. But here's the thing, because a lot of people will point to the Raimi movies as reasons that Sony should keep Spider-Man. I don't credit Sony with those movies. I credit Sam Raimi with those movies. And Spider-Man 3 to me is emblematic of, this is an example of, they saw how successful Spider-Man 2 was, and then the studios were like, oh, well, then we need to get in here and make sure this stays successful, which they did not do. And so they're like, okay, put Venom in. I don't want to put Venom in. Well, you're putting him in. Okay, fine. And this is what you got, a product that, while not terrible, was substantially weaker than the second movie is better than the first one. let Sam Raimi cook, like you said. You know, someone did not let him cook,
Him cook.
and essentially, you know, that's for me. Like once you start seeing those executive fingerprints on the movie, that's it. You know, it's one of the reasons why, to me, and I'm not. I hope I'm not going to alienate too many people with what I'm about to say here, but it's one of those reasons that, to me, like the Amazing Spider-Man films are decent at best, and at worst, oh my god. I feel like you should stick with me with all of the movie reviews just so we can have the same two voices, because I'm gonna go into Amazing Spider-Man, at least the second one, and I'm gonna have some not nice things to say about it. But
Oh nah, I'll have to go to rehab after if we talk about TASM 2. I can't. I
uh,
just the
yeah,
thing is though, I know like it's one of those things as well. Like we were speaking about earlier, like it's one of those things where TASM 2 has kind of gained traction in the community, especially after No Way Home. I think everyone looks at TASM 2 with rose tinted glasses now because of Andrew Garfield in No Way Home. Because
oh yeah, oh
let's be honest,
absolutely,
Andrew Garfield in No Way
absolutely,
Home was handled the best he's been handled since
yes,
2001.
yes,
And like I think people, I think people obviously his arc in No Way Home was, and if we end up talking about it, we'll talk about it more there. But briefly, his arc in No Way Home was based off what happened to him in TASM 2
yeah,
and kind of rounded that story very
yeah,
nicely,
no,
which TASM 3
absolutely.
was meant to do. Um, so I think people go back and look at TASM 2 and go, "Oh yeah, it's actually pretty good." It's not. It's definitely not. There's so many problems. But
Andrew
yeah, anyway.
Garfield, and again, yeah, I know we're a little off topic here, but Andrew Garfield was doing the best he could with what they gave him, which was not good stuff to work with. Like absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, People will point to the Into the Spider-Verse movies. No, I don't credit Sony for that. I credit Lord and Miller for that. You know, like when Sony leaves their creators and actually lets them do their job, then you get good Spider-Man movies. But if they get too successful, and we'll, I guess we'll end with the MCU comparison here. Um, they made two Spider-Man movies that were extremely successful, and Sony didn't do those movies. Marvel Studios did. Okay, Sony was just the one that was allowed to distribute them and choose the actor and everything. That's why they're their movies, but they're still very much MCU movies. But they tried after the second movie to be like, okay, we're taking Tom Holland and we're going home. We almost did not get No Way Home. They basically said, like in the wake of Far From Home's success, they're like, okay, I think we can replicate what you're doing, and we don't need you anymore. That's what it felt like happened, because there were headlines going on for about a month, basically saying that, yeah, Sony is pulling Tom Holland out of Spider-Man. He's going away. And dude, were you like were you doing any were you doing any content creation during this time? It was probably about, I don't know,
Yeah.
3 years ago.
I was screaming. I was screaming for
Yeah,
them to like
yeah.
come to a deal. But there
Mm-hmm.
was a recent MCU book that was just released. I don't know if you've seen it, but basically, apparently, it wasn't actually Sony's fault at all.
Really?
It was Disney. Apparently, it was mainly on Disney wanting Disney were trying to push for more revenue share,
Yes, I
and
do
fair enough
remember
because
that.
they
I do remember that. Yes.
and yeah and like obviously and they kind of fell out because Sony realized it was kind of like when they fell out, it was kind of the start of the decline of the MCU. And I think Disney saw both Disney and Sony saw a weakness in their partnership because apparently um if everything went swimmingly, Spider-Man was meant to go on to be one of the main characters in the MCU.
Right.
It was meant to go on to be one of the big three, replace obviously Thor, Iron Man, and Cap, be one of them. And it's meant to be him, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel. But Disney
Oh.
started crumbling, and Captain Marvel didn't
Oh.
do very well. Obviously, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. And obviously, then the Disney and Sony deal crumbled after Far From Home, and the MCU started falling to pieces. And Sony are going, well, what's going on here? the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this was the start of the downfall of the MCU, and then COVID happened, and everything's kind of going on at once. And Sony are like seeing all these little holes starting to form in Disney and Sony. At the time, it was Captain Marvel, and then Disney are trying to ask for more money, and Sony's like, no, guys.
I'm not sure.
It was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with the timeline that you're putting all of this on, because I think this would have happened in the wake of Far From Home's success when all of this came out, and that was a good that was a good almost year before COVID really hit. So,
Yeah, no, I'm talking about. I was just talking generally about the
oh,
MCU
okay, okay,
kind of
okay.
crumbling there. But the first thing, the first kind of inkling that it was kind of falling to pieces was Captain Marvel, which came out the early 2019,
Yes,
and that
yes, it did.
obviously was critically. It's a really interesting read. I didn't read it. I didn't read it myself. I had a friend explain it to me. Because we were talking about this the other day, and he was kind of explaining to me how the whole fallout between them was kind of more on Disney and their decision making, and it kind of led to the MCU's kind of downfall as a whole, with the
Hmm.
way that they handled certain things and the way that they handled and the way that kind of the cookie crumbled. But apparently, Sony aren't to blame as much as everyone thinks. So that's kind of the
Interesting. What was the name
main
of the book?
takeaway, which I thought was weird. It's called like the MCU or something. I'll just look it up right now. It's apparently meant to be a really interesting read.
Okay, all
Um,
right. And
it's
again,
called
I know.
MCU: The Reign of Marvel Studios.
Okay, all right. I'll have to check that out. And again, I know we're a bit off topic from the movie here, but what started this entire tangent was the idea that, again, Spider-Man 3 was kind of just where Sony really started putting its fingerprints on everything. And when they do that, starting at an executive level, I feel like the films dip in quality. I feel like the TASM movies were pretty much entirely, nothing against Mark Webb, but I feel like he was probably just letting them do whatever they want. They put someone in who didn't have a big name that they could push around, and I felt like that's what happened. So, um,
Yeah.
this is probably a theme that I'll want to explore in another episode of a podcast somewhere down the line, but yeah, it is fascinating to get into, and as we both just demonstrated, it can be quite the rabbit hole. So, you know.
It can be a big rabbit hole.
Okay, so cinematography and special effects well, actually, hold on. No, we talked about the villains and then led into this. We haven't talked about any of the other actors. So very quickly, let's talk about the people that are in all of the movies, and I'm talking about Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, J.K. Simmons, and Rosemary Harris. First of all, I'm just going to say very quickly, great to see them all. Um, I, Everybody was basically doing their characters. I did feel that MJ is a lot more sympathetic in this movie than she had been in previous movies, and so I did like her more in this movie. She still had her moments where I wasn't too big a fan of her, but she definitely, I felt a little bit better towards her than I did, say, in Spider-Man 2. Um, Rosemary Harris is great as Aunt May. I can't say much else. I loved James Franco's performance as Harry Osborn in this one. I felt like he'd been in the background, and it really, I mean, he still kind of was, but like he was doing some things in the background that really messed with Peter. And then Tobey Maguire. What can I say about Tobey Maguire that has not already been said? He was an excellent Spider-Man choice. He does more. I guess we can talk about the symbiote's effect on him and him being a jerk, which he does that well. We got the Bully Maguire dances from out of this,
Hey,
and
Maguire.
yeah, and then J.K. Simmons. I mean, like you had mentioned earlier, like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man as someone you can't see, being in that other role. Anyone else you could see? For me, that's J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. And apparently the MCU agrees. I was
Mm.
ridiculously
Mm.
happy when he came back at the end of Far From Home, and I really kind of feel like at least as far as the movies go, if he wants to play J. Jonah Jameson, I say let him. you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree though. All the actors from the other movies did a great job, especially James Franco. I felt like he was probably one of the weaker performances in Spider-Man 1 and
hmm
2, and I felt like he stepped it up every movie. And yeah, he did a very good job. Everyone did a very good job, I thought.
James Franco actually, I think he said during an interview, like he demonstrated a lot more just kind of like um, introspection than I would have given him credit for as just like an actor. But he basically had a fairly cogent analysis of the symbiote during an interview. He's like the symbiote essentially, he's like it represents like drug use that makes you feel good, makes you feel powerful, and that like Peter, like that's what Peter is going through during this time, including like this kind of like this breaking free of the habit, and maybe even like a little withdrawal phase. And I was like, that's better than I would have given him credit for. So um it was just an interesting thing for him to say, and I remember reading it and going, wow, okay, my respect. So
Yeah.
all right, let's move on to cinematography and special effects. I'm just going to start by asking you, what about the cinematography and or the special effects in this movie stood out to you? What were some of the more memorable things that you remember seeing visually?
All of the budget went to Sandman. All of the
Yes.
budget went to Sandman.
No, I
There's
agree.
one scene, it's the final battle, where you can pause it, and it's Peter and Harry on
Uh-huh.
Harry's glider. And you pause it, and oh my god, they look disgusting. Jeez. Like, you watch Spider-Man 2, and it looks 10 times better. Like, it, but Sandman looks incredible in every shot. The budget went to Sandman. That's what stands out to me. Sandman looks absolutely phenomenal, and he looks better than he did in No Way Home. 10 times better than No Way Home.
Oh yeah.
Literally, the visual effects team for Sandman in this movie, incredible. I don't know what they did, but they cooked.
No, no, no. And I mean, especially for like that final battle where he's basically a sand kaiju. That was a lot of fun to
Yeah.
watch, and I don't know, I really liked that. I think for me, one of the visuals that I liked, and again, this is a Sandman moment, is just where he's Spider-Man's got the symbiote. He is in full-on rage mode, and they're fighting. And he grabs Sandman's head and then like rams it into a subway, and you can see the train moving, and it's like stripping his face away. Like you can see his head getting smaller as the train tears it away. And for me, that was just really cool. I was like, wow, that's like terrifying, but also I'm kind of entranced by it. A lot of
Mm.
fun that, and I really did enjoy it. I also liked the way that Venom looked when you get your first like full shot of him, and I think it's about the only thing that I really liked about that Venom. Like everything else, I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, all right, he's there. I'll accept that he's there, but like his first real presentation, and I'm not even talking about like when Eddie Brock, he's coming out from under the goop and you see that. I'm talking about like I think he's kidnapped they've kidnapped MJ by that. No, he's talking to Sandman, I think. But I'm thinking about when he's kidnapped MJ and he's standing in the webs above her, and just taunting Spider-Man. Like I liked that until we saw Topher Grace's face, and then I'm like, no, go back, go back, go back to Venom.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know. Again, nothing against Topher Grace. It's just that was not the right moment for that. So,
No.
but yeah, I mean, a lot of good stuff. I feel like in general, because they use CGI in the first two movies, and I think they did a good job with those as well. But I really kind of feel like things were smoothing out in three. Like they're like I can notice sometimes in the first two movies, like, oh yeah, that's definitely CG. Like during like some of the web swinging and some of the acrobatics. here in three, I mean, aside from the stuff that is very obviously CGI, like Sandman and Venom and everything, I feel like some of the other CGI, like that may have been used for, say, web swinging, it feels a lot more natural, and I really, I like to see that kind of technological, evolution, and that things get a little bit more integrated and a little bit more easier to believe visually. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, overall, I mean, they are a feast for the eyes, and I like it. All right, let's talk criticisms and praise for this movie. So, um, basically, what's good, what's bad about it. Now, I think we've had a nice little discussion about Spider-Man in general and Sony in general. Let's really drill it down here, though. What works about this movie for you, and what doesn't work for you?
Um, I think we've pretty much covered what works and what doesn't for me anyway. I can't really think of anything else. It's more just the overcomplicated nature of how many characters there are, etc. I think that's the main issue for me. And what works is, I think, Sam Raimi. If I was to put it in one word, what works, it's Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi pulls through with his style and his craft, and I think it's obvious that he he tried to polish a turd as much as possible. The turd being Sony and their
Mm-hmm.
ideas.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard for me to argue that. Um, I've seen the Spider-Man films, and I've seen the Evil Dead films, and I've also seen Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Okay, that's pretty much all the Raimi films that I've seen. And based on that little handful of films, I basically am of the opinion that if you hire Sam Raimi to direct your movies, then you let him frickin' direct. Like just hire him and then stand back. Let him do his thing. Um, but I mean, yeah. Uh, Sam Raimi is kind of the
No,
heart
if
of
you
these
yeah.
movies. Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna completely agree with you. Yeah. If you're gonna bring Sam Raimi on board, um, and he's not the best director in Hollywood, but he's a damn well good one. He's made some good movies. If you're gonna bring him on board, just let him do his thing. And I'm surprised, I'm not surprised, should I say, that he I'm not surprised that the plans for Spider-Man 4 fell apart based on, the relationship they had in Spider-Man 3, and yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm
know. I know.
it's
What could have been? Uh
I know.
um but yeah, I mean again, and I know I'm probably beating a dead horse here, but yeah, like it's the executive interference that I feel really brought the quality of the movie down, and probably caused Sam Raimi to eventually be like, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And
Yeah.
I get it. I get it, and I understand it, and I wish that hadn't been the case. But I mean, if that hadn't happened, maybe we never would have gotten Spider-Man in the MCU either. So I don't know.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think, we can sit here and talk about the intricacies of the movie and, and the performances, the characters, whatever it may be. But I think at the end of the day, the overall kind of thought is that, this is a good movie, but I think it's just the studio interference. Everything leads back to the studio interference. Many of the issues that we have with this movie lead back to, well, they had to do this to, to please Sony, to, whatever Avi Arad, whoever it may be. I, yeah, I think we're all I think every time we get into a different topic of conversation, it always leads back to
I agree.
to the studio. So like I think that says everything about Spider-Man 3 that you need to know.
All right. So in that case, what we're going to do now is we're going to go to final thoughts and ratings. I don't know that either of us needs to do a summation. I think we've basically said everything that needs to be said here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip ahead to the tier list rating. Now, I'm building up to a big tier list episode of the Spider-Man movies. but I'm doing a review for all of them first before we get there. So, if you were doing a tier list of the Spider-Man movies, and I have reason to believe you probably have done this already, um, but where would you place this one and why? And my tier list tends to go from S to I think I don't remember it's D or F, but just it's around there. So
If I'm gonna say it's S to D, I'd probably put it. Is it harsh putting it in C? I think the issue is like we have so many Spider-Man movies, but most of them are really good. So it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
by comparison, you have to put it in one of the lower categories because the only ones that are really worse are TASM 2, in my opinion, and probably the Venom movies and Morbius. But obviously, they're worse than TASM 2, in my opinion. But the
excuse me.
But in terms of like Spider-Man movies, I think it's obviously still one of the weaker ones. Possibly Far From Home's weaker. I don't know. The thing is Far From Home, Spider-Man 3, TASM 2, maybe not TASM 2, are still good movies. So um, it's like I want to put it B, maybe A, but I can't. I got to give it C on a Spider-Man comparison level.
I would agree with you in the sense that this is a difficult one to place because it's definitely better than some and definitely worse than others. And like you said, there have been so many good Spider-Man movies made that it's going to be hard to really kind of figure that out in kind of a static vacuum, essentially. I guess for my own part, if I were to do, I guess if I did an S through F, I would probably place this in C, possibly B tier. Like it, because there are the greatest, there are the really good but not the greatest, and then and then for me B tier is like stuff that is still pretty darn good. C is like, yeah, it's all right, and then D, what were you thinking? Actually, F is what were you thinking, and uh, D is just kind of like between meh and what were you thinking? So, you know.
Yeah.
So, all right, okay, and I think we're more or less done, unless there's anything else about Spider-Man 3 that you would like to say.
I think we pretty much covered it all.
Okay. Well, thanks again to Lewis Films for joining me on today's episode. It's been fun having someone to talk about the movies with, and I'm going to try to continue that tradition as much as possible. So, but thank you for being on here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me again. It's been a pleasure. I always love talking Spider-Man, so you know.
Well, now I've asked you before where you can be found online, and so we all know about your YouTube channel. So Lewis Films, for those of you who don't already know, go subscribe. But are there any other like social networks you're on, or any other projects you're involved in that you'd like to shout out? I think I saw that, like for instance, you have a Twitter. At least I think that's you. They're using your icon and everything, so you know.
Yeah, I've got Twitter. I don't really use it that much. It's mainly just my YouTube.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for listening, and now let's move on to the web spinner's recommendations. All right. And you remember this part, right? Recommend a piece of media.
I do, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Okay, so let's see. For this week's web spinner's recommendation, I would like to recommend the show Star Trek Lower Decks. I know some of you Spider fans may not necessarily be Star Trek people, which is fine. I happen to like a whole lot of other fandoms in addition to Spider-Man, and Star Trek is one of them. Well, Star Trek Lower Decks is an animated Star Trek show. It has just finished its fourth season, and it is, I think, one of the things that I like most about it is it's a Star Trek show for Star Trek nerds. If you're someone that has watched like every episode of the original series and Deep Space Nine and Next Generation, you're going to find all kinds of references in there that they just kind of throw out offhand. It's very rewarding if you're someone who just is obsessed with Star Trek. And the kind of fast paced wackiness of the show actually surprisingly works. And there was no better example of this when they did a crossover episode with the live action show Strange New Worlds, which that was an actual Strange New Worlds episode, so not quite as lower decks as I'd like it to be, but it was really good. And if you like Star Trek, if you really like Star Trek, highly recommend Star Trek Lower Decks. I can't wait for the actors strikes to be over so that show can get underway again. So, Lewis, do you have any recommendations this week for my listeners to read, watch, play, or listen to?
I'm gonna keep on topic, because last time I didn't, but since there's a lot of symbiote stuff happening, Spider-Man 3, we're talking about Spider-Man 3, Marvel Spider-Man 2 happened. You want one of the best symbiote stories, in my opinion, that's ever happened. The Spectacular Spider-Man Season 1 symbiote story, the symbiote episodes. That's my recommendation. I think it's one of the best handled symbiote stories in Spider-Man's history. And since we're on topic, and since Marvel Spider-Man 2 just came out, I think, yeah, go watch that. It's
absolutely,
good.
Absolutely. One of the things that I loved about Spectacular Spider-Man was when he's kind of trying to break free of the symbiote, and it kind of like takes him over, and they go into his mindscape. And that's basically where you get the origin story at that point, with Uncle Ben trying to defend Peter from the symbiote. I personally think that is a beautiful story. I've had other friends who've been like, that story sucks, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? Where is your heart? So, but that I definitely love, and there's a lot of other symbiote stuff in there that is very, very worth watching. So I highly agree. I highly agree. All right, and I believe that brings us close to the end of the show. If you enjoyed this episode of The Webline, please be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube channel, simply named Spidey Librarian, where I also maintain a playlist of all podcast episodes. The Webline is also available on audio services, so when you see us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or another such service, please leave a review, a rating, and where possible, follow us as well. You can find me on my socials under the name Spidey Librarian on Threads, Twixter, as I'm calling it now, Instagram, Facebook, WordPress, and Twitch. Finally, if you'd like to shoot me an email, you can contact me at spideylibrarian@gmail.com, where I'll be happy to hear your thoughts, rants, and ideas. You never know. Your email might be featured in an upcoming episode. The Spidey Librarian Patreon gives listeners and viewers of the podcast access to my small but growing community as I keep creating content about our favorite wall crawler. There's currently just one... Hold on. I lost my voice there for a second. There's currently just one tier, the $5 Spider Society Citizen tier, which will afford members shoutouts on the Webline podcast and on my uploaded YouTube videos, access to the private patron feed featuring extra polls, behind-the-scenes posts, and media of me and my cat, Trouble, and a special role on the Spidey Librarian Discord server, Spider Society Citizen. More roles, perks, and possibilities will arise as we grow and diversify the existing tier, including the prospect of early access to videos, patron-only videos and streams, and appearances on live streams and the podcast. So join the Spidey Librarian Patreon today and help grow our Spider Society Citizen tier into a full-blown Spider-Man community. Next Sunday, November 12th, will be an episode holiday for the Webline, but join us again on November 19th as I kick off the final block of 5 episodes for 2023. Steve Moore will again join me to work on another tier list of Spider-Man comic book covers from the 1960s. Which covers do we consider the best? You'll have to join us in 2 weeks on November 19th to find out. Thank you for listening, and until the end of the... Oh, hold on. I'm going to revise this. All right. I want to say thanks again to Lewis for being here with me at the end of the podcast. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I've always enjoyed talking about Spider-Man. It's gonna be hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. I always look forward to our collaborations. So thanks again for listening, and until the next episode, I'll be wishing you a good day. Bye.